Hello my small fat adaptive family and welcome back to the Keto Kitchen. It is week 3 of the Great British Bake Off and that means it is bread week. I'll be honest with you, I'm dreading this week because not only do I have to make bread, which is something that is so not keto friendly and none of the ingredients are, and I've got to adapt it into a keto friendly version, but this video is also coming out on Friday 13th, so I just feel like everything is against me for this episode. Ginger, who does a keto-friendly recipe of the category of the Great British Bake Off episode, the day before the episode airs, this week has done a seed bread that looks absolutely amazing, so make sure you go and check out her video so that you've got something to munch on while you're watching mine. Despite my fears of bread week, Paul Hollywood and his bread obsession filled me with glee this week because I was left with so many choices. Number 1 was the signature bake, and it was tear and share breads. Number 2, the technical challenge, was what we call baps in England, but they're more commonly known as just burger buns, and they had to do veggie burgers with them. And number 3, the showstopper, was about creating scores in bread, cuts in bread, that when baked left these artistic designs on them. Now, you know which one I chose because it's in the title of this video, but the reason I went with this one, the showstopper was something I could not physically create. With the ingredients we use for keto breads, we cannot make a bread that rises in that way that scoring it would make such a big difference and make what looked like a drawing. It would just end up collapsing or just completely cover up the score marks we made. And the baps is something that I could do, but I already have keto bun recipes on this channel, so it didn't feel like enough of a challenge for me. So of course that leaves the tear and share breads. Which one could I not stop thinking about? Well, of course it's going to be the most intricate and courageous one out of all 12 recipes. The one recipe where someone took a curry and made it into a tear and share bread. So for week 3 of the Great British Bake Off, I am ketofying Michael's Keralan Star bread. This will consist of fathead dough, some that is coloured red. Fathead dough being what I would argue is the best keto dough in the world, that pretty much consists of mozzarella, cream cheese, egg, and some kind of keto flour. The dough itself is full of herbs and spices. It will have a homemade coconut chutney that is of course keto friendly. And there'll be just a little bit of fancy twisting and twirling going on. Now the great thing about this recipe is that unlike Michael's high carb Keralan tear and share bread, this recipe doesn't require any really intense and complicated things like proofing the dough, kneading for an exact amount of time, timings and things like that aren't as strict as they are with the breads that they were using. So this is going to be a lot easier than what you saw on the TV on Tuesday. The hardest thing for us is going to be the dough cooling too much while we're still trying to shape it. With that being my biggest worry for today's episode, I think we'll breeze past this one, or I hope we breeze past this one because it could be a complete disaster. Finally, just a few notes before we start. Number 1 is Michael did, 6 discs of dough and then twirled it? I'm not going to be doing that. The dough we're using, it's too complicated to work with it at such a quick speed to be able to make 6 different discs and have them still be able to be formed. So we're just going to use 2. Secondly, you don't have to use red food dye if you don't want to for this. I'm just doing it because I'm trying to mimic what I see on the show, and it's more for looks than anything. And number 3, as always, is that this recipe that I've adapted and created from a high carb recipe, I've never tried it before. And this is my one shot to make it, so if it fails, you get to see all of that on camera. So this is how you make Michael's Keralan Star tear and share bread. So for the bread, you will need 2.5 cups or 282 grams of mozzarella that is pre-shredded, 2 ounces or 57 grams of cream cheese, 3 eggs that have just been lightly beaten, 1.5 cups or 150 grams of almond flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of ground paprika, 1.5 tablespoons of ground coriander, which Americans call cilantro, 1 egg white, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, or you can use Nigella seeds, and a handful of fresh coriander, also known as cilantro, that has just been finely chopped. For the coconut chutney, you will need 200 ml of full fat coconut milk, 80 grams of shredded, or it's sometimes called desiccated coconut. Make sure you get unsweetened coconut, because otherwise it will just be full of sugar. 3 garlic cloves that have been minced. I'm using 3 teaspoons of like an easy garlic paste I've got. You can use that instead if you want to. 1 teaspoon of ground coriander, also known as cilantro. 1 teaspoon of coconut oil, this is for flavour. 1 to 2 red chilies that have been finely chopped up. This really depends on your taste. I'm actually using like an already chopped up mix we've got, but I'm only using 1/4 teaspoon because if you know me, you would know that I'm absolutely horrendous with spice. I really can't cope with it. But if you want it hotter, feel free to make it hotter. I think Michael put something like 4 to 6 in, so you go as hot as you want. You're also going to need a dinner plate, just a standard big plate, a glass drinking cup. Size isn't massively important, you just want to use it so that you can make markings later. I would suggest you also use gloves, like just rubber or latex, because if you're opting for red food dye, we're going to have to use it in a way that is potentially just going to get our hands covered in dye. And in terms of the red food dye, I am using a paste. I will always recommend gels and pastes over liquid, but you can use a liquid food dye if you have nothing else. Let's get to baking. First thing you want to do is you want to get a large baking sheet and put parchment or greaseproof or a silicone mat in it. That is your prepared sheet ready to go. The second thing you want to do is start your coconut chutney. Now, I've actually already started it, and I've done this because it takes about half an hour to be ready for the next step. But let's walk you through what you need to do. You want to get a medium pan, saucepan, and you want to put your coconut milk in it and put it over a medium heat. You're just going to bring it to a simmer and just leave it until it's just ever so gently boiling, just bubbling away. Then you're going to add your shredded or desiccated coconut, your garlic and your chilies, giving that a nice good mix. If you're using a lot of chilies, you want to mix it until your mixture is like a light pink colour. Otherwise, you want to mix it until it's sort of a little bit tangy smelling from the chilies and you've got that aroma from the garlic. This will take anywhere from sort of 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Then you want to take it off the heat and you want to add in your coriander, also known as cilantro, and your coconut oil, and you want to just mix that and make sure you well incorporate those ingredients and that coconut oil is fully melted and mixed in. Then you just set it aside and we'll come back to it later. You want to preheat your oven. You want to preheat it to 200 Celsius or 400 Fahrenheit. Which brings us to here. In this bowl I have my almond flour, I have the baking powder, the paprika and the coriander. I'm just going to give that a mix, just make sure that those ingredients are well combined. I'm going to take my 3 eggs that have been lightly beaten and just add them to the mixture, and then I'm just going to mix it all again until it's well combined. And you're left with this really quite wet mixture, wet sticky mixture. Don't worry about it, it's supposed to be like that. So this gets popped to the side and we then start on the most important bit of the fathead dough, and that is the mozzarella. So for the mozzarella, you want to put your pre-shredded mozzarella in a large microwavable safe bowl, and all you're going to do is add your cream cheese. I like to give it just a little bit of a mix in, not massively, just to help it melt and incorporate a little bit better. And with this, we're just going to whack this in the microwave for sort of 30-second, 45-second increments, getting it out and stirring it until we get a sort of fondue substance and it's all melted and mixed and beautiful. Mine took about 2 minutes and you can see it's gone into this sort of really stringy, uniform fondue mixture. So what we're going to do now is the hard part. You want to take your almond flour and egg mixture and you want to add it to your mozzarella mixture. And we are going to mix these together until they are uniform and one piece of dough. This will probably take you the longest time out of everything, just because you've really got to put some elbow grease into this. What I do, because I make fathead a lot and a lot of different ways, is I mix it as much as I can with sort of a spatula, just so I can push it all like flat, get it spread. And it's also so the mozzarella can cool down a little bit so I can handle it. And then once that's all happened and I can't do anything else with the spatula and it's still not uniform, is the point I get my hands involved. I always recommend kneading fathead dough with your hands because I find you get the best results. A lot of people don't. So I think it's time to use my hands. Two things that you can do to make this easier is you can either wet your hands, which will just make handling this dough easier because it's quite sticky, or you can use a keto flour and just give it a bit of a sprinkling just to make it a little bit drier on the outside. I prefer to do that. You can obviously use almond flour, you can use really anything, lupin flour, a little bit flaxseed, you can use crushed up pork rinds. You don't have to use coconut flour, but I really suggest you use just a little bit of coconut flour if you have it. A sprinkling on top of your dough just to give it a push. Oh wow, that's really quite doughy. You think I'd be used to this, but this is a little bit of a different sensation to usual. Giving each side a little bit of a sprinkling, and at this point I start just squishing it together with my hands, pulling it, turning it, doing whatever I can. Just doing this, I find, just makes it all stringy, which means that you can then just form it better. And I'm just going to keep doing this until this whole thing is in one nice uniform colour. There's a few streaks, like little ones. I'm not massively bothered about them, so I would say I'm happy with that how it is. So I'm just going to sort of mould it into a ball, and then what I'm going to do is split it in half. So now I have two fathead doughs, sort of pretty even in size. I'm going to put one in the bowl and leave it. For the other one, this is where I highly suggest you use gloves, because this is where it gets messy, because this is going to be the one that we are colouring red. Now, a really good tip I didn't think about is make sure your hands are dry after washing your hands before you put the gloves on, so you don't just have to struggle into them and rip them in places. Oh, great protection, Elliot. So as I said, I'm using a paste, and all I'm going to do is take the back of a spoon and just add some of that paste in. This is predominantly guesswork, and it will heavily depend on two things: the concentration of your dye and how dark you want this dough. Because as I said, this doesn't add anything but looks, so you don't have to worry massively about the colour. And remember, it will lose colour and darken up in the oven as well. So I'm just then going to knead it again. Well, I'll tell you what, it's really easy to knead with gloves on. And, you know, I'm just going to go backwards and forwards, add some colour, knead it, add some colour, knead it, until I get to a colour that I'm happy with, that is uniform all over. I tell you what, I'm currently on a 19 hours into a fast, and the smell of this is driving me loopy. Absolutely loopy. It just, oh my god, it smells like just walking past a bakery. Just that mix of sweet and savoury, and oh, it smells stunning. Hey look, we're getting colour now. So we don't so much have a red dough as a pinky dough that's, who knows how it's going to turn out. But I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that being that sort of pinky dough like that. So let me just go and take these gloves off and just get everything ready, and I'll show you what you're going to do with that red dough. Okay, so with the red dough, we're going to create a circle with it. The way I've done this is, hey, that's actually come out really red now that I've stepped back and had a look at it. That's awesome. Is I've got my dinner plate, and I've put a little bit of coconut flour on it just to stop it sticking. You can wet the plate, you can add almond flour to the plate, all the things we spoke about earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mould it using my hands. Now the reason I'm doing it with my hands is I just find with a rolling pin and with look how sticky it is, I just find it a little bit easier to do it with my hands. And this one especially is sticky because it's had a lot of TLC, hasn't it? We've really worked into this one to the point I'm actually going to need more coconut flour because that is sticking really quite horrendously. It's probably easiest to just start by doing this and just spreading it into a disc in your hand, because kind of gravity does its thing. And then I am actually going to give it a go wetting the plate, see if that makes it any easier. Nice wet plate. Let's see if that's a little bit easier. And I'm just using this bit of my hand to just flatten it down so it's kind of pretty even. And I'm trying to just make sure it's all sort of level so that we don't have lots of lumps and bumps. There will be a few if you do it this way. You can of course roll this if you'd like to. I just really don't like rolling fathead dough. So now the challenge is, will this come up easily? You're just going to use a little bit of patience with it. We've got a hole, that's okay, we can mend that. It is stretching a little bit, so what I'm going to do is fold it in half. And then I'm going to take it over here to, oh no, it's all bunched up again. Right, let's try that again. This is the baking pan that I'm actually using to put it in the oven. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to form it on this with my hands and then trim it using the plate. I am quickly just going to give this a little bit of a spray with some coconut oil, just because I'm quite worried about how sticky that fathead dough is. So I'm going to whack that in there. Again, I'm just going to disc it like that. And then as it starts to fall, we'll spread it out a little bit. Oh dear me, that is very sticky. That's, ooh. There goes all my excitement for this week. That's stickier than recipes that have got whey in them, and whey is notorious for being sticky in recipes. Ooh, don't let kids do this one. It's nearly there, so I'm just gonna put my plate on it and just cut around that. I'm only using a blunt knife because this stuff comes up really easily, and then that gives me a bit of a guideline as to shape anyway. This is where it sticks to the plate. I'll tell you what, I'm losing a lot of dough with this stickiness. So you have that, and that is your base layer. Let's just double check I'm happy with the size of that. Yep, beautiful. So next thing you want to do is get your glass drinking cup, and you're going to find the middle. I'm just doing it by rough estimate, not calculations, and you're just going to make a mark in the middle that you can then identify. This gets popped to the side, and we return to the coconut chutney for its last step. So you should have left your coconut chutney for about half an hour, and you'll know when it's done because, as you can see, you can't see any of the milk. What's happened is that it's all been absorbed. So with that all absorbed, you want to take this and you want to put it either in a food processor or a blender, or I'm using a immersion blender, a stick blender, and we're going to blend it into a paste. I think the consistency of the paste kind of depends on what you want the consistency like. Do you want it really sort of grainy from the coconut, which is what I'm going for, or do you want it to be more like a pate in the sense that it doesn't have any sort of texture to it and it's more about taste? I've done mine to sort of graininess, and I'm going to give it a quick taste because I haven't yet, just to see if I'm happy with the spice, because remember, you can always add but you can't take away. Oh, I'll tell you what, that is lovely. It's not spicy at all. So when we get to the next bit, I'm going to add a little bit of spice to it. Believe it or not, dare I say it. But I am going to just give it another pulse because it just feels a little bit too grainy for me still. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the texture I've got. It's kind of like hummus, I guess is the best way I can describe it. A little bit grainy, but there are bits that don't have any grains in them. So give me a second and we'll move on to what we now do with this. I have brought back the red stickiness of doom. All I'm going to do is take my coconut chutney and I'm going to spread it between the edge and that circle imprint I've made. Be careful not to overfill it, and don't fret if you have any of this left, because I'll tell you what, it's really nice. It's got this ever so slight sweetness to it, which I'm assuming is from the garlic and the coconut, and then it's got this little chili kick to it. Nothing huge, obviously. That's just my weak mouth tasting that. It's really, really nice. I honestly would eat that in a keto ice cream. That's how I feel about it. Weird, but the first thing that I thought of was, oh, that would be really nice as an ice cream, like a spicy coconut ice cream. You're just gonna sprinkle on some chili flakes because I could do with it a lot spicy. It's only an ever so slight kick. So now that's looking like this. It's worrying, isn't it, when you lift up the thing and it don't move? This goes back to the side, and out comes your second fathead dough. This dough should be very forgiving. As you can see, it's nowhere near as sticky. If it's too hard to work with, just whack it in the microwave for 10 to 30 seconds, which is just enough to get it warm enough so that it's easy to work with, but not enough to cook the eggs inside. Yeah, this one wants to work with me. I'm happy about that. So with this one, I'm just disking it again because I just find that the easiest way. And because this one is so forgiving, I'm getting out my messy dinner plate, and I am going to mould it onto this one. Do you know what? Doing these bake-off videos, I'm learning something about myself. I have to do things the hardest and most complicated way for myself, don't I? I could have just rolled this out and then cut it into a circle. But no, I had to do it this way, where it's falling apart in the middle and it's too thick on this side, and it's getting cold, which means I might have to put it in the microwave and it's sticking to everything. I had to do it the bloody complicated way, because I find it easier. Probably not easier. So I'm happy with that as my dough. It's a little bit rough, but we'll clean it up in a minute. So I'm going to now get my other one. There is definitely a colour difference between them. I don't need to worry about that. So what I'm going to do is gently lay this one over that one. It's breaking as I'm doing it, but as I said, this dough is a lot more forgiving and you can work with it as you go. So that one then gets gently laid over that one, and all I'm going to do is just, using my fingers, stretch the dough on top so that I can match it to the one below, because it's a little bit smaller, not massively. It's enough for me to just push and pull and crimp and, you know, do what I've got to do to mend it. This is one of the things I love about fathead dough, is if you break it, you don't really need to worry, because all you have to do is just pull a little bit off somewhere else and use your hands to just kind of paint it on somewhere else, a bit like, you know, pottery or clay or something like that. We're sculpting. So then you just grab any little bits I've missed. Don't want to waste any of this. Beautiful. We put the plate on top, and I'm just going to trim around the edges. You kind of just want to pinch them together with your fingers to seal any spaces between those two. Really not very hard at all with that sticky one. Again, take your glass that you've used the rim beforehand and kind of wing the middle instead of grooving there, but this time leave it in. So now what we're going to do is, using a knife, you can use a blunt one, is you're going to cut this dough all the way through into quarters. So now you've got 4 cuts in it. You want to go in between those 4 cuts and turn it into 8. We're going to cut those 8 again in between them, which will leave us with 16. We have this. Now I'm going to have a look to see what it takes to twist it, but if it doesn't look like it's going to work, I'm not going to go out of my way to do it. Because yeah, okay, so it's falling apart. I'd love to do twists, I really would, but it just looks like this dough is just too sticky. I worked with it just a little bit too much. Before we put this in the oven, because we are very nearly there, is you're going to grab your egg white and you're going to grab your salt. Put your salt into your egg white, give that a really good mix. Because what salt actually does is it breaks down part of the protein and makes this so it doesn't go like gloopy while you're trying to spread it. It's not gloopy, see? It's like really minorly gloopy. So get a pastry brush and just paint that all over your tear and share. Get your oregano or your nigella seeds, and you want to give a real good sprinkling on top. I said 1.5 tablespoons, I think, but it looks like that's actually just a little bit too much, so I'm literally just giving it all a light coating, and anything I don't use will just go back in the pot. This is what it looks like going into the oven. It will go into the oven for 20 to 25 minutes until it is nice and golden, it's risen, and I will come back and we will find out what's happened. I had this in the oven for about 20 minutes. I turned off the oven at about 17 minutes and just left it in because it had already browned. Listen, gorgeous. I've sprinkled it with the fresh coriander. When I say use a handful, don't use a Hulk handful like I did, because I've already got half a bowl left over. It's just way too much coriander, cilantro. And it didn't massively keep its indents. I can just about see them, but you wouldn't know from looking at it that it's a tear and share bread. So what I'm going to do is cut into it. It did, it kept it. Look at that. Look at that. Oh my god, I mean the bottom no, but oh my gosh. And it's nice and sturdy, a bit soft. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Let's cut this open and have a try. I'm just going to really quickly get a photo first. I will tell you what, the smell coming off of this is beautiful. It's kind of a little bit herby, a little bit spicy, but there's this really sweet little pinch that I can smell. And I'm assuming that's the coconut chutney. Oh, okay. Let's have a look. Let's break that there. And there we've got our pink fathead, our coconut chutney, and then our top fathead with its oregano or nigella seeds on it. A little bit spicy, really coconutty and rich. The dough, I think, is just a little bit overdone. It's just a little bit too crispy. Yeah, I can see why you got a handshake. I wouldn't say that's the most amazing thing I've had. I wouldn't say it's as good as last week in terms of taste, but that is nice. That is really nice. That is going to pair beautifully with the creamy curry that I'm having this evening. And something you probably all want to know, does it taste cheesy? Because it's got mozzarella in it. Not at all. I don't think you'd be able to tell there was cheese in this. It's a little bit stodgy, but you don't go, that's stodgy because it's a fathead pizza base. Oh, and before I forget, in my excitement of conquering bread week, the macronutrients for this bread is as follows. It makes 16 slices. 2 slices is a serving, therefore it serves 8 people. Per serving, you're looking at 332 calories, 28 grams of fat, 14 grams of protein, and 4 net carbs. So super high in fat. Fantastic side for any curry. So join me next week for Dairy Week. How vegan ominous is that? Are we making mozzarella from scratch? Are we making tarts or custard? I don't know. We'll find out next week. Like this video if you found it interesting, insightful or helpful. Subscribe if you're inclined, and if you hit the bell it will notify you as to when I upload. Any questions, any comments, any queries, anything down below. Keep calm, keep on. Thanks for watching.